It's Tuesday, September 26th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show presented by NerdWallet. It's a hell of a day to talk ball, man. And joining me to do just that is Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
You know what starts in week 4, Matt Harmon, are the London games, the overseas games, which I love. I love like early Sunday morning, kind of bad football. I'm really excited about it. So I'm glad that we've arrived here in week 4.
The next 3 weeks, right, are all London games. I will say,
starting it off with Atlanta and Jacksonville, the two hottest teams. I mean, we couldn't be exporting two finer teams.
I'm glad you've derailed my thought process by bringing this up immediately, because number one, is there anything more annoying than when you're already stressed, you're already you're not feeling your best, life is tough, work is tough, and then somebody throws a giant road trip at you, or you have to go, travel somewhere. That's basically what the Jaguars and Falcons are going to have to deal with right now. I mean, especially on the Jaguars side, we're going to talk about them a lot here in the panic meter section. And now it's things aren't going well for you. You're trying to figure things out. Oh, by the way, you have to do not a cross country trip, a cross Atlantic trip here.
Yeah. And obviously there are 1,000 different ridiculous interviews and press obligations that accompany these trips. It's got to be wild from a player's perspective. But I am really looking forward to it because I love having football basically already underway after you wake up.
Yeah, well, luckily Arthur Smith is a known non-cantankerous, very friendly with the media type of guy. So I'm sure he'll love the entire process. But I'm with you, man. On the West Coast, I found them to be a little irritating because it was we are taping FFL and this game, when we used to do it on Sunday. And this game is underway as soon as I'm out of bed, right? I've maybe showered. I'm maybe in the car on the way to the studio. And this game is already on. Here, I've already said this, moving back to the East Coast, we tape a little something in the morning, and then I'm it's literally the one time that East Coast football is good, because I'm done. We're done taping stuff at 9:30, 9:40, Andy, on Sunday morning. I'm what the hell am I supposed to do with myself for the next few hours? Boom. Now I have an answer. I'm watching Arthur Smith cook on Sunday.
That's right. Yeah, you are. I'm so excited about it.
Well, thank you for that little jolt there, because I actually kind of sort of needed that. What we do here on the Tuesday podcast, we go through the people's panic meter. We're going to get to that, but we do have 2 big pieces of news to hit that I felt deserved their own little sections here. First of all, unfortunately, we talked about it on the recap podcast with Scott. Now we have official details. According to Adam Schefter, an MRI revealed on Monday that Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams did indeed suffer a torn ACL. Per a source, Mike Williams is expected to be ready for training camp next season. Again, per source, per Adam Schefter. It's a bummer, Andy. And, it's we've been here before with the Chargers, right? You start plucking pieces away from this team, and all of a sudden this offense, which I think by and large has been successful under Kellen Moore. Justin Herbert was incredible, just pitching heat all Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. But now you take out a guy who has been a critical outside receiver for them. Without Williams, what are your expectations for this Chargers offense? How does it change things?
Yeah, Williams was having a good day, was obviously having a good year. So just really, really unfortunate. That game was everything that we'd hoped it would be, right? Right down to the, you knew that one team would end in sort of gut punch fashion after, 50 points were scored or thereabouts. So it was absolutely everything that we could have hoped for, except for the injury. You knew it was going to be serious as soon as it happened, right? Expression of the player and the fact that he was carted off and all that. So that was obviously terrible. We have the fantasy consideration of exactly how they backfill for Mike Williams. And I will say that I have been a little bit surprised. I was in the car earlier today. I was catching a little Sirius XM fantasy sports radio, and they were all talking about Quentin Johnston. And then I launched the rankings tool that we use, and Quentin Johnston was already sort of preloaded up near in I don't know, top 40, something like that. And whoa, wow. he's not who replaced Mike Williams. Like, I don't know where we're getting that exactly. And I think long-term, super interesting player, fills the need for the Chargers and all that. But there were 10 dropbacks in that game after Mike Williams exited, and Josh Palmer ran a route on all of them. Like, Josh Palmer is the vet that they trust, and that might not be like the answer that people want from this situation, but he is very clearly the guy who stands to gain the most value. He's not Mike Williams, right? Like, I don't know what percentage of Mike Williams he is. It's a downgrade. But he is a veteran who filled in capably both for Williams and Keenan Allen last year, right? Like he's a pro. He's not my favorite receiver. He's not like, I don't know, you don't get fired up to place a fab claim necessarily for Josh Palmer, but he is the guy who's going to step into a ton of routes and a ton of opportunities. And we'll see with Johnston. He's still, he's still earning his playing time.
Yeah, look, I got a lot of stuff wrong this year. I got something wrong in this receiver core that I'll talk about here in just a second. This very team, I got a thing wrong with the wide receiver position. But I'm not saying this to backpat myself, but I could not have been more correct about how this Quentin Johnston thing was going to play out, that Josh Palmer was going to play ahead of him to start this year because he's a developmental receiver. So far, through 3 games, Quentin Johnston has run a route on fewer than 27% of the dropbacks. Meanwhile, Josh Palmer has been up there near 60%. Like, that's... And by the way, Josh Palmer, 12.5 average depth of target. Mike Williams, 12.2 average depth of target. Like, he's probably going to be that vertical, pure like outside receiver. And yeah, it's funny. Like, what percentage player is Josh Palmer of Mike Williams? I mean, it's probably going to be important now to really see how Josh Palmer's played so far this year, because I don't think he's played particularly well from like a separation standpoint when asked to play in like Keenan Allen's old role. But I think he is probably like a downfield contested clasher. He is, maybe again, he's a sizable downgrade on who Mike Williams is a player, but that's more of a statement of Mike Williams being very good. Like, probably the peak of the the average separation, non-elite X receiver type in the NFL. He's probably like at the peak of that prototype. I don't think Palmer's there, but it's also not really the player that Quentin Johnston is supposed to be either. He's supposed to be a guy who stretches the field horizontally, stretches the field vertically, but you want to move him around and get matchup advantages. So, like, they're still trying to figure out who Quentin Johnston is. I will say this, though, Andy, and to bleed into the point of, like, I got to take just a huge L on, and I'm, by the way, happy to do it for fading Keenan Allen in drafts. Like, I love Keenan Allen, the player. He's been one of my favorite receivers. Favorite superstar receivers, underrated superstar receivers of the last decade. So if I got to take the L on trying to be a little too early on his decline, I'm happily going to do that. But I will say, watching this game back on film, the Vikings and Chargers game, the Vikings defense, they talked about with Scott, they blitzed the crap out of Herbert yesterday, and he did nothing. That did nothing to slow him down. Meanwhile, they're backing off coverage, and Keenan Allen just got these like wide open windows. I mean, Kellen Moore has done a great job. Like, everything I said about Keenan Allen to start the year, like the only routes that he's still successful on, I mean, those are the only routes they're having him run right now. They've just got him perfectly in this correct role. I do wonder, from like an offensive efficiency standpoint, if Quentin Johnston doesn't step up and there is a lack of vertical big plays in this offense because of that, do people start to put the squeeze on the Chargers like we saw them put the squeeze on the Chargers last year? And then what does this offense look like in an effect of that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I do think by the second half of the season, we're probably going to have to see a fair amount more Quentin Johnston. I guess the warning that I wanted to issue is that I think you're going to go out and, like, if you try to add him aggressively across all your fantasy leagues, I think you'll probably be dropping him in a couple weeks, because I don't know that this is something that, like, all of a sudden Quentin Johnston I mean, shoot, they have a bye coming up too, so like. You're not going to hold him through the bye. He's not going to. I just don't think it's going to be a particularly exciting week 4 for him. I listen. Of course, I could be wrong.
Totally.
But I also don't want to be like the guy who says that every rookie receiver should play immediately every snap. And I totally get that it's frustrating when you see big plays from guys like Marvin Mims and you see the big play potential from guys like Jalen Hyatt. And why are they barely playing? There is a reason that we used to think of this as like a multi-year developmental position. And some of it is just the the technique required at the NFL level. And some of it is just like learning your responsibilities other than when you are the primary read on a pass route, right? Like, you got to run block too. You got to like know the whole playbook. You got to be able to play it like, you have to actually be a functional player for like 60 snaps a game. And it's not that surprising when these guys aren't fully ready to go in that capacity. So I don't want to, I might do it with Mims anyway, because I have a lot of him, but I don't want to be the guy who's just like, I don't understand why he's not immediately in every snap, running a route on every drop back sort of player. It's not that simple.
Well, I know like Hayden Wings from Underdog has talked about like the post-buy rookie bump for every position, but especially for wide receivers. It's just been a theme the last few years of like the second half of the season, these rookies, that's when they really start to shine. So if you are like a Quentin Johnston dynasty bag holder, don't freak out that he hasn't played yet. Because maybe they have these great plans for Quentin Johnston, and we see. I mean, the problem is the Chargers have a damn bye in week 5. So like, is he going to come out the gates against the Cowboys in week 6 and the Chiefs in week 7? I mean, he's got your Bears in week 8. So that's probably Quentin Johnston's arrival party. Go ahead and book it right now. Week. Yeah, October 29th, 2023. That's the Quentin Johnston arrival game. So that's when we'll see it. No, but maybe second half of the year, that's when they see it again. Andy, you're so right to point out we could both be just totally wrong here. We don't know. And maybe he comes out and runs around on 80% of the dropbacks against the Raiders defense, and they're cooking from there on with Quentin Johnston. But I do think you're right to at least flag that, hey, if you go and grab this guy or you still have him on your bench and he's not playing a ton, there might be a reason for that. That's all we're saying.
Yeah.
Next news item here, and this one we can be a little quicker on because Saints head coach Dennis Allen said that Derek Carr is week to week due to a sprained AC joint, just like we said on the podcast yesterday. He is not. It's not the worst case scenario. Dennis Allen even didn't want to rule him out for Sunday's game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think this is a pretty good dodged bullet for the Saints because I know that people love Jameis Winston, but he's like a meme quarterback to me at this point. I'm just really not trying to see him starting for this Saints team.
Yeah, that's kind of the difference between like rooting for a guy and like I don't know. I would find Jameis somewhat easy to root for. He's been kind of fun over the years, but I don't think he's better or equally good to be at the controls of the offense for the Saints as Derek Carr. Like, which is not, I don't mean that as a absolute ringing endorsement of Derek Carr. But I would definitely prefer Carr at the controls there.
Yes, me too. Again, from like a stability point with Chris Olave. That's what I want to see it there. All right. With that, let's get into the post week 3 People's Panic Meter segment. Show's all about you, the people. So every week we reach out to you to see what has you panicked heading into a Monday morning about your fantasy team after all the action on Sunday. The best responses get discussed on the show. If you're uninitiated or you keep forgetting, there's a couple ways to submit your players and teams here. The mailbag, you can shoot a written, email, or voice memo anytime during or after the Sunday games to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. Very disappointed in you guys this week. Not a lot of great submissions to the mailbag. 0 voicemail. I mean, come on. Maybe some of you have just accepted your fate at this point, which is honestly, maybe that's the healthy way to live your life. Okay. So, but again, more voice memos, more videos. That's better. I want to see y'all step up. Okay, let's step up next week, heading into week 4. Of course, I also solicit responses on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. So you can get that at my Twitter handle at @Harmon_BYB. But let's get into the week 3 submissions here, Andy. Look, we got to do our weekly Falcons segment here. TK sends in, I'm panicking on Drake London. Falcons are incredibly run heavy, and Arthur Smith seems to not value London or Pitts, despite the fact they took him top 10 in the draft. Even in game scripts where they are losing, he is not being targeted a lot. Target share might be okay, relatively speaking, but they have a low passing volume overall. Desmond Ridder does not look like an NFL quarterback, so even when he does target London, the quality of those throws is really bad. How panicked should I be? Yes, it's our weekly Falcons discussion on this particular segment.
Yeah,
Andy.
well, this is missing a key detail, which is that Desmond Ridder actually put the ball in the air 38 times. It just didn't go well. Like you got as much volume as you could possibly hope for from Atlanta's passing game. It just wasn't pretty volume, right? He didn't reach 60% completion percentage. There was just an absolute, good quarterback makes the throw. Like Kyle Pitts had a man beat, very long probable touchdown if he hits him in stride. Should have at least been like a long field flipping gain. That didn't happen. I mean, honestly, I would be more aggravated coming out of that game if I was a Kyle Pitts manager than a Drake London manager, because at least I've had one game from Drake London. We're still waiting for our first notable game from Kyle Pitts, and it should have been this one. I mean, he had a lot of opportunities, and most of it is just on Ritter, because one of those again would have been like I don't even know how long it was, 70 yards. It was long. That was going to be like everybody who told you to draft Kyle Pitts was going to be congratulating themselves if that thing just gets completed. Just a really dreadful performance from Ritter.
I saw our mutual friend, I think it was Denny Carter, say on Twitter, like, we need to do like a wellness check on the people who quote Kyle Pitts' like route participation on every Monday morning. Yes, I 100% agree. Like, please send somebody to check on those folks. I think the Kyle Pitts people don't even send the panic stuff into the segment because they're just like have accepted their fate. Like I'm the jackass with Kyle Pitts in my favorite dynasty team, and I'm just rolling him out there every week because like F it, I got no better option. I mean, I'm not turning to Hayden Hurst here. So like,
you're setting the lineup every week and you're like, good process.
Yeah, totally. Well, Kyle Pitts makes sense. The route participation's there. Remember when he had 1,000-yard season? I mean, who cares at this point? Yeah, they're in the bear zone. Producer Colin said in the chat, they're in the bear zone. We're just like, it is what it is. It's a civic embarrassment, and that's on me. Like, I got nothing better to tell you. I will say, just for the Falcons stuff, we mentioned they get the Jags, who can't rush the passer. That we'll talk about the Jaguars here in a matter of moments. So that's a pretty friendly spot for Desmond Ritter. But week 2, I come out of there, and this is how it goes with young quarterbacks. Like, we'll talk about Sam Howell, right? Like, there's moments where you're like, oh man, he's looking pretty good, and then like has a disaster game, and that's how I feel with Desmond Ritter right now. Where week 2, I feel like, oh, you saw some of the tools, some of the things they like about him, and then in week 3, you're like, okay, do they need to be in like Jets territory where they have a clear runway here to win the NFC South? They've got a nice roster. The defense has overperformed, but like the quarterback just like can't do it. So they get Jacksonville, like I mentioned, in London in week 4. They get Houston, they get Washington, they get Tampa Bay, they get Tennessee, they get Minnesota, they get Arizona. Like, this is a real nice runway. What does the Falcons record have to be at some point here for us to get, even just to get on like Taylor Heineke watch?
Yeah, no, it's a really fair point. I was thinking as you were talking about that, obviously you think about the talent at the skill spots in Atlanta. It's wild that they weren't on Lamar Jackson in the offseason. And I know it was commented on at the time, but if he was legitimately available, like, it's just wild that they were not investigating a quarterback upgrade in the summer. If this was like, I don't know, I'm not trying to write off Desmond Ritter either. Like, he might be fine. And I would agree that week 2 was there was a fair amount of promise there, and it's just not perfectly linear. It's not like a smooth ascent to being a great quarterback. It never goes that way. But yeah, we can't be far away, because it's like they can compete for this division, I'm fairly sure, with Desmond Ritter and with the 2 running backs just getting, 35 touches a game. I think that makes them competitive in the division, but they can't hope to, win a playoff game win 2 playoff games with that. They're not going to make a run in January with what they have. So Heineke probably can't be the answer, but kicking the tires on another quarterback definitely can be.
All right, let's move on to the next one here. Stefan B says, 16-team standard league. My running backs are Nick Chubb, Rhamondre Stevenson, and Rachaad White. Quarterback is Danny Dimes. Time to blow this whole thing up? 3 question marks. Well, Rachaad White, by the time we're taping this, hasn't played yet, so no comment on Rachaad White. Obviously, Nick Chubb, sorry about your luck. Danny Dimes, he'll have his moments. He's not going to have games like he did against the damn 49ers. You don't play Danny Dimes against the Cowboys and the 49ers. Yeah. Don't do that to yourself. But let's talk about Rhamondre Stevenson here, who, I know we're irritated about Ezekiel Elliott, but Zeke has given them no reason to not give him the ball, and Stevenson really quietly hasn't done a lot to demand more touches in this backfield, Andy.
Yeah, Stevenson has had some really nice, particularly after the catch moments this season. I think like Stevenson looks like Rhamondre Stevenson. I wouldn't say that his play is particularly disappointing. I think this is more just about like what they want the identity of the team to be, and the simple fact that they had real plans for Zeke Elliott when they signed him. It wasn't a like strict backup situation. You know, he's in terms of snap share, that still strongly favors Rhamondre. So fine, but you don't play in a league where you get points per snaps. Hopefully, I'm probably out of this business if we ever start playing that way. And Zeke has been fine. Like Zeke has been fine. This is the discussion that we were having about Zeke last year when he wasn't like end stage Le'Veon Bell last year. Like he was perfectly fine. And he's perfectly fine right now. And he's a pro. He does what coaches want him to do, right? Like he checks a lot of boxes for a coaching staff. So I think Zeke is just going to continue to play. And that was a lot of work for him last week. And it was in a win. So things don't generally change, coming off wins in the way that fantasy managers sometimes want them to. So I just think we have to settle into this and know that it's going to be an ongoing factor for the rest of the season. We talked about Rhamondre in the preseason a little bit and how last year, like he was super open about the fact that he was just on fumes at the end of the season. And that was a lot of work. And, we usually hear running backs and coaches talk about how, get stronger as the game goes on, but nobody gets stronger as the game goes on, right? Like some people are better suited to it than others, but like that much usage and that much wear is eventually going to impact someone's performance. So like, I think this is actually probably the right situation for the Patriots. It's just going to get really uncomfortable in fantasy. But this was a knowable thing by the time we were drafting.
Absolutely, and I think a backfield rotation like this is fine, but the offense has to be much better than the Patriots offense, which is also much better than the offense that was in place in New England last year. But the jump from hideously, unserious to sub-league average is still a huge jump, but they're still sub-league average, and you're splitting the touches on a sub-league average backfield. You need one guy to like significantly blow away the other guy. And at this point, Stevenson, even though I think he's fine, he hasn't done that. So that's where we're at. Next one up, Saxman Tommy says, this feels amateurish and reactionary, but a guy in one league just put Devin Achan. He's officially said he wants to be Devin Achan, not A-Chain. That's an Adam Schefter tweet we got today. So I'm going to try to get used to that. Okay. Anyways, point being, put him up for a trade. Saxman Tommy's thinking of offering Josh Jacobs. Nutso, full PPR. Jacobs is feeling super busty this year. All right, Andy has kicked, in shock, has been knocked back. I think we can
walk away. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can agree that no, you should not. By the way, would the person who has a Chan even accept that offer?
Right.
Like that's the thing. Would they even accept? Probably not.
So a couple things, and I'm going to talk about Chan later when we get to waiver ads this week, because he's the clear number one waiver ad, no question about it. Guy just gained 200 plus yards, right? Like 4 touchdowns in a 200-yard game will make you the number one waiver ad. If I have an ongoing concern there, it's that he's really little. He played big this past week against Denver. Super fun game, right? He's shedding tacklers all over the place, and obviously he can run away from anybody. He's got sprinter speed. He's 5'8.5" and 185, and that's much smaller than most of the running backs that you think of as small. That's not typically the guy who is going to get 22 touches a game week after week after week. Like, it's awesome that it happened. We're probably not going to see a higher scoring individual game all season. I'd be a little bit surprised if we do. It was great, but I wouldn't automatically think of him as somebody who's going to give us 20 touches a game. I'd love to be surprised. It would be outliers in the NFL are awesome. And if he ends up being an outlier, that's going to be cool, but he would have to be a pretty extreme outlier, because he's tiny by NFL standards, by the standards of that position. I can't wait to see the way Mike McDaniel gets him involved, like, going forward. I'm not trying to throw shade on the player, who is super exciting, but if I could trade him for Josh Jacobs, I definitely would. And I feel like I'm just going to give boring answers every week when people panic on Josh Jacobs. And I will allow that if he does not, like Alexander Mattison just had the get right game against the Chargers defense. And if it doesn't happen for Jacobs, you can be pissed. I still think he's a great player. And we have years of evidence to back that up, right? He wasn't just like a one-hit wonder last year. Like his entire career has been full of highlights, and he's been a really exciting player. So I'm going to keep going back to him. I'm going to be the very last fantasy expert who still has him ranked in my top 10, even if he keeps producing these sort of 65 yardish fantasy lines. I totally get it. I just think he's a great player. And while he's seeing the kind of workload that he is, I'm going to keep going back to him.
I think that is a great way to look at this. All right. If you out there have Josh Jacobs on your team and he does not produce in week 4 against the Chargers, doesn't have the get right game, even Alexander Mattison, who was far from perfect in that game, but he was able to get over on the Chargers defense. If Jacobs doesn't even have the Alexander Mattison game, and look, Jacobs is much better than Alexander Mattison when they're both playing at 100% of their effective capabilities. If he doesn't even have the Alexander Mattison, you're allowed to flood Andy's mentions, and you're allowed to flood the fantasy mailbag email. You're allowed to send in a 60-minute voice memo about why you're panicking about Josh Jacobs, because I think that's where you're panicking. The only thing that has me just spooked about it, a couple stats from two of our, again, mutual friends in the industry here. John Daigle posted that Josh Jacobs has 10 carries for 5+ yards this year, and he has 12 carries for negative yards, 0 to negative yards this year. Ian Harditz notes that since switching to the jersey number 8, which obviously is just this year, I don't like that, by the way. I'm sorry. I know I'm just a huge old man curmudgeon. If you've been a jersey number, you should stay that jersey number as long as you're with the same team. Okay. My guy Curtis Samuel's 4 now. I'm always like, who the hell is 4 for the freaking Washington Commanders? I don't like it. Anyways, Josh Jacobs, since switching to jersey number 8, has not had a rush attempt go for more than 7 yards. I mean, it has felt that way, especially watching him against the Steelers on Sunday night. So I just think the lack of explosiveness could be a Jacobs thing. I don't think he's gaining extra yardage, but hey, it's 3 weeks. He didn't have training camp. Again, if he goes nutso against the Chargers, can't be surprised by that.
He's also, there are plenty of instances where he is met by more than one person behind the line of scrimmage, which is just a really, it's just a tough way to make a living. And that was kind of part of his story. I feel like earlier in his career, he'd find himself in these predicaments where there'd be 2 would-be tacklers behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, and he would manage 3 yards on a carry that could have easily gone for a loss. But you can't get people excited about stuff like that, but it ends up showing up in the missed tackle numbers and things like that. I just think he's gonna get his legs under him. I think he's gonna be a very good player, because he's even been in sort of tough sledding situations before and really thrived. So I'm not going to allow people to panic, but again, I will allow it. Hit me with all the abuse.
All right, let's move into the social media submissions here. And the first one, the Jaguars absolutely dominated the submissions in some form or fashion this week. I'll go over 3 of my favorite Jaguars related replies that I got. First, from at Fantasy Fargo, Trevor Lawrence. We all expected him to take the next step, but today he lost to a Houston team without Derek Stingley. Is it the O-line? Is he just not on the same page with his wideouts? Can it be turned around before it's too late? At N said, is Calvin Ridley hurt or just struggling or both? And then finally, at Drew Met_FF says, seems like just yesterday, everyone was telling us how we all missed out on Calvin Ridley. That actually feels like
that one hurts.
Yeah, that one hurts because I'm sure I said it. Because I'm sure I said it.
Personal. Yeah.
And also, Drew, I would say it doesn't seem like just yesterday to me. That seems like 100 years ago already. Calvin Ridley's dominating week 1 feels like 100 years ago. So, Andy, I actually rewatched this game on film, charted Calvin Ridley this morning, but I want to know, before I kind of give my thoughts here, what do you think is up with Jacksonville right now?
Yeah, first of all, they've just had so many near misses over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, it was all those college touchdowns they were scoring where receivers got 1 foot down in the end zone, and it didn't amount to anything, obviously, because it's an NFL game. This last week, a couple of bad drops from Ridley, one of which should have been a touchdown. And that makes all the difference. A really bad game from him too, false start penalties, drops. And I like, you want to just say, okay, we'll crumple this up and toss it. And we know that Calvin Ridley's a good player, but he is also a guy who's been away from the game for a couple of years. I mean, he looks like a guy who's been away from the game for a couple of years. I will definitely take personal responsibility for being one of the people who at about like halftime of the Colts game, I was like, oh my God, this is vintage Calvin Ridley. He's great. He's back. Nothing to worry about. No concern here. And it turns out there is some reasonable level of concern. I would say that a level of panic on Ridley specifically is warranted. And then that obviously spills over to Trevor Lawrence. Now, I don't think that Trevor Lawrence is like, some mid-level talent or anything like that. I think he makes genuinely some wow throws. I think that guy's got a hell of an arm, like composure, confidence to make every throw. Like I'm still really excited about Trevor Lawrence long term. They've had a bunch of near misses over the last couple of weeks, and they needed to put up a number against Houston. That was really disappointing.
Yeah, very disappointing. I saw Nate Tice, who works for The Athletic, does some work for us here at Yahoo as well, post that the Jaguars offense has lost 15 expected points because of drops so far this season. That's the most points lost from drops through 3 weeks since 2019. By the way, drops are super fluky. They're not like a sticky stat, so that you could sit there and tell yourself like, look, these guys got to execute better. But overall, these are, Christian Kirk had drop problems last year. Zay Jones has been a drop-prone guy. He didn't play in this game on Sunday, but still, Evan Ingram certainly had issues with drops throughout his career. Ask any Giants fan ever. And, Calvin Ridley, not perfect from a drops perspective either. Like, this stuff's going to happen. But I think for me, watching this game back, there's been like a real, and I alluded to this on the Sunday podcast with Scott, but there has been like a real tension over in Jacksonville about like, is Doug Peterson calling plays? He clearly said at preseason he's going to pass this thing off to Press Taylor, and which I think is it's admirable from Doug to try to get his guy like in the limelight more in Press Taylor. But Doug Peterson, you are one of this team's biggest advantages. And like you feel it right now that this team doesn't have it from a play calling perspective and even from an offensive design perspective, man. Like I'm watching, they just line up Calvin Ridley in one spot. They never move him around and that's it. They do a ton of work now to the sideline. I think they're almost like over infatuated with Ridley in a weird way where it's great that you have him, but you don't need to be throwing like deep curls and deep comebacks and deep out routes to Calvin Ridley all the time. You have Christian Kirk, you have an Evan Ingram. Like, let's get those guys advantageous spots in the middle of the field, like what we were doing last year in the back half of the year that was really working with Trevor Lawrence. So sometimes teams are weird like this where it takes them a little bit to really integrate all of this together. I agree. Some level of panic is not, I wouldn't say panic, but some level of concern is warranted with Ridley, where because of some of these miscues and stuff like that, and is he actually a little more rusty than maybe we gave it credit for? But still, I think overall he has been a positive force for the team, even if he's made some of these mistakes. Like the idea of Calvin Ridley is still present there. I think that can still trickle down to Trevor Lawrence, who when he has time, that's another thing. Their offensive line's not played very well either. So, but the one thing I want to just flag this too. I do kind of think they came into this game. This happens with teams, right? Like it happened. I think it had definitely happened with Dallas against Arizona, where they like, yeah, we can handle this Cardinals team. I think Jacksonville came in here and thought they could handle Houston. Lot of runs early in this game. Drive 2, 4 of 5 plays were runs. There was a false start by Ridley mixed in there. Drive 3, 6 of 10 rushing plays. It ended in a block field goal, and then like boom, you're down 14-0 like that, and then you're suddenly completely off script. And Doug Peterson even said after the game to Bucky Brooks, who works for the Jaguars on the media perspective, shout out to John Shipley on this one. Peterson said, quote, I don't know if we as a team kind of are buying into the hype, maybe the preseason hype just a little bit. You're reading your press clippings, as sometimes we talk about. And this is the NFL, man. I don't know if a team is distracted somehow, some way, but we have got, about 24 hours to get it right here. Less than 24 hours to kind of soul search, get back together tomorrow, regroup, watch this tape, and be honest with ourselves. And we're on to Atlanta. And obviously we know they're on to a London trip. They played a little bit like a team that felt like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fine line too, because they should be confident, right? Like the end to their season last year was spectacular. They are an ascending franchise. Like, I think they're going to be fine. I feel like they've been so close that it's not. I don't know. Are you going to be surprised if Trevor Lawrence goes for like 320 and 3 touchdowns next week? I'm not going to be surprised when he has a big game. Like, it's definitely coming. We're within a month of like being wowed by the way that game started. That Indy Jacksonville game to start the year was so much fun in terms of both offenses, like what Indy was doing for Anthony Richardson right away, how Ridley and Trevor Lawrence looked together. Like, I just feel like we're going to get back there. I hope that we end up getting a really, really fun Wembley game out of these two teams. I'm not so sure that we are, but I just feel like the Jags are so close. But I had a lot of people hitting me up like in the middle of the day on Sunday, complaining about Trevor Lawrence, and I just, I feel like they're right there.
I feel like they're right there too. They just have a lot less margin for error because Texans look pretty good with CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
And the Colts, I mean, they beat Baltimore without their star young rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson. So like the AFC South is better than expected. If the Jags mess around, we could be watching the Texans or the Colts like sneak into a playoff spot if this division is not good.
That's probably some of the like confidence that Peterson was talking about too, is they probably just assume too much within the division, because it's pretty easy to tell yourself a story about how we should go like 6-0 in this division, right? And that is already off the table. So they were probably sort of counting their way to like 12 wins, 13 wins, 14 wins. Are we going to be in line for a bye? Are we like I can imagine Jacksonville getting out over their skis a little bit that way. So if Peterson is already alluding to it, then there probably was some of that in the building.
Yeah. The head coach doesn't say that if it's not a thing, like, period. Yeah. Speaking of the AFC South, the only team we didn't talk about is like rosy optimistic future, the Tennessee Titans. At Titan Travis 08, I think he has Traylon Burks as his profile picture. So, I think he's experienced with what he's talking about here. The Tennessee Titans have been panicking. The offensive line is horrendous. Scott read off some of the absolutely ridiculous offensive stats that the Titans posted against the Cleveland Browns. And the Cleveland Browns are a great defense, by the way. But I asked Scott this yesterday, and I feel even more definitive in my answer, Andy. So I'm going to let you chime in on this as well. Is there any reason to roster a non DeAndre Hopkins, non Derek Henry Tennessee Titans player in fantasy right now?
No, and it's getting pretty shaky with like Hopkins too, right? Hopkins is like in the mid 40s in the receiver. Yeah, and I realize that DeAndre Hopkins has been hurt, and I'm sure he's going to be fine, and I'm sure he's going to be some sort of target magnet, but he is an older player.
In some way, I thought you just misspoke and said he was in his 40s because he's like
he's not quite there yet. He's not quite there yet, but I think he's like wide receiver.
It feels like it, but.
I think he's like wide receiver 45 or 46 on the season, something like that. Like, it's not good. None of this has been good. And like Henry's a bit of a worry because he's been dinged. The rookie is actually out snapping him a lot of the time because they're getting in, terrible game situations. And the line isn't, I don't know that the line is fixable. That's the thing. Like, I don't know how this gets a whole lot better. They have a bunch of veterans who've done it before. So it won't be this bad week after week. Like they had fewer than 100 total yards in this game, which is really like it was the worst offensive performance in a week in which like the Broncos got embarrassed, the Bears got embarrassed, plenty of teams got embarrassed, but this was about as bad as it got. And I think again, you mentioned it, also a little bit of a statement about Cleveland. Like Cleveland's defense right now leads the NFL in everything, everything that matters, except for takeaways. But they're best defense in terms of points against, yards against, passing, rushing. Like they're holding teams to like it's like 4.6 or 4.7 yards per pass attempt, 2-point-something yards per rush. Like that defense has just been awesome. And you give them a weakness, and they absolutely attack it. And Garrett has been as good as it gets. Like that defense is going to be a real problem. They're available, by the way, in over 50% of Yahoo leagues, which is kind of crazy to me. So full credit to that defense. But yeah, the Titans line absolutely crumbled, and I don't know that you can just fix that on the fly in the middle of a season.
It took until 1:39 p.m. Eastern yesterday for the Browns to face their first play in the red zone all season and it's only because Elijah Moore fumbled inside the opponent's 20-yard line. By the way, that drive that got them in the red zone ended in a sack. 0 points allowed out of that drive. So yeah, the Browns defense is absolutely crushing it right now. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Jets pain. We got plenty of that in the submissions as well. At Rasrar 89, I guess. Breece Hall. It has him panicked. If this offense is going to be so one-dimensional, is there any optimism for Breece Hall this year? At Dustin Davis 104 says, really sad about Garrett Wilson. I should have just drafted the actual Devontae Adams in all my league instead of the guy who was going to be, quote, the next Devontae Adams. Dude, I just like, it is sad. Honestly, it is sad. The Jets, it's a sad thing that Robert Saleh seems to have found himself. He slipped through a black hole in the time space continuum because he's just right back in 2022, baby. I mean, we've got media members trying to read Garrett Wilson's lips on the sideline as he's clearly frustrated. Robert Saleh said today, when asked about if there was going to be a new, if they were going to make an ad at quarterback this week, he said that's a Joe question. Joe is Joe Douglas, the general manager. Like, this is exactly what happened last year, and it's the same in fantasy too, where we know these guys are good, but can you play any of them?
Yeah, this is getting to be another one of those bear zone situations because I only have so many different ways to talk about Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. Like, I don't, it's bad when the quarterback is this bad and the offense isn't functional. That's not good for anybody. Like this is a team that's probably going to score. I don't know if it's really going to be Zach Wilson for a while. This is a team that's going to average like 10 to 13 points a game. It's terrible. It's really, it's just really bad. I can't give a lot of hope to you. But I don't. Garrett Wilson is actually a great player. And I don't think we should try to spin like wherever it is that you took Garrett Wilson in the draft. I don't think we should try to spin that as some huge mistake. We did call out in the summer that he is kind of the one guy who's going in that range who hasn't done it before, but it was just so evident how great he was. And obviously Aaron Rodgers is a huge upgrade. Like, this whole situation is sad for the league because the Rodgers storyline in New York was going to be great all year. It's just a bummer, but I don't think that, I wouldn't kick yourself over the process that went into taking Garrett Wilson in the same range as Devontae Adams. I think he is going to be that kind of player. And hopefully, next year with Rodgers, even though Rodgers will be another year older, like I hope we really get to see sort of that fully realized offense. Cause I think it's going to be really fun. So I wouldn't beat yourself up over that, but I don't have a lot of hope to give you other than, the sooner we can get Kirk Cousins to New York, the better for all of us, or Atlanta, frankly. Like, we need to find we may need to, I can't have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson ruined. So let me backtrack there, but it would be, that is obviously what they need. They need a real pro quarterback. They need a quarterback who can keep the offense on schedule and can actually feed the playmakers because they don't have one now.
I really want to know. I just like the Jets talk themselves into this fantasy that, Aaron Rodgers will mentor Zach Wilson and in 3 years he'll be magically better. And Joe Douglas will actually be right about taking him number 2 overall. And just like, that's so far from reality at this point. Like, everything's gone to hell. So you need to, dude, call Carson Wentz back. He apparently called them. There's no way Carson Wentz is worse than this. There's just
worse.
No way.
No chance.
Yeah. All right, next one up here at @semigray_FF. Jahan Dotson, I'm afraid the breakout isn't coming in 2023. Unfortunately, my guy Jahan Dotson has been in this section every single week. And I had, part of me, like last week, Andy's like, I know it's not there for Jahan Dotson, but he's playing all the snaps. And hey, Sam Howell has looked good. And then Sam Howell had about as bad as a game you could possibly have as a starting quarterback. Sacks, turnovers, the whole thing. He's on pace, I think, to get sacked more than David Carr did in that record-breaking Texans, the expansion Texans, okay? Like, in Washington's line's not an expansion team bad, so
no.
I don't know. What are we, again, they get the Eagles next week, they get the Bears. It seems every time I'm like, hey, this guy needs to bounce back. The Bears keep popping up on their schedule. So week 5, he does get the Bears, but is Sam Howell going to make it to week 5?
Yeah, the Bears are really the gift there because Philly's defensive run, obviously great, right? We're speaking before the Monday night game, and maybe they get right in all aspects in the Monday night game, but the defense hasn't been, it's been vulnerable. It's given up a couple of big passing performances. And we're not, it's not like they've been getting lit up necessarily by like Mahomes. They've, it was Mac Jones who lit them up the first week. So that's been a little bit of a concern. Still, like the issue with Sam Howell has definitely been how long he's willing to hold on to the football. Super ugly game. I feel like some of the complaining and some of the panic about Jahan Dotson is really because you probably didn't take. I mean, I don't know where everybody took him, and maybe by the end of draft season he was actually going like 4th round, 5th round. But that's not where his ADP was. And like guys who are taken in the range where he was taken, it's okay if they have some quiet weeks. But I do feel like there was a sense that, everybody who was drafting Jahan Dotson was in on, like secret insider information that no one else knew. And, it was expected that this was just going to be the guy who broke out and had like the 1,400 yard season. You can probably dial back your expectations from that. Like, I don't know that Jahan Dotson this year going to be like an all-pro receiver. Perhaps not. I do think he's going to have some great games. And I also feel like if you drop him now, he's going to be a success story for the person who adds him in ahead of the Bears game for sure.
Right. Like I think Jahan Dotson's ceiling is like a 900-yard season with 7 touchdowns. And like he probably can still have that season. Like it just isn't going to like production is not just steady all the way through, right? Like a guy averages 55 yards, 60 yards receiving, and it's like, great. He doesn't do that every week, right? There's ups and downs, and Dotson's definitely on a down string right now. But yeah, I wouldn't drop him because I'm with Andy on that one. This one made me laugh. At C_A_Huggins sends in, I fear that JSN is going to become a route running maestro that does next to nothing. In other words, Jerry Jeudy. Obviously that made me laugh for the Jerry Jeudy part of it. It's not been a great run out for JSN, Andy. And, he was a guy that got a ton of steam. Then he had the wrist injury and we're like, all right, let's all prepare for him to like maybe start the year on IR. He doesn't. Pete Carroll, funny injury situation. Who would have ever thought of that? And he's really just been getting like no downfield looks at this point. And he's like a distant third receiver on this team. Is anything with him? Is he another guy that we shouldn't worry about? And like by the back half of the year, he's just going to be cooking.
I don't know that he's going to be cooking. Like if we continue to have a like fully operational DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett all year, the run game is still solid. I don't know how much room there is for JSN to really be a star, to be like a set it and forget it sort of fantasy player. You're probably going to have to run him out during the bye weeks. I'm a little surprised that people thought he was going to be like immediately play. I never had him ranked as like an immediately playable wide receiver. I wasn't thinking of him that way. I still think like long-term ceiling is fantastic, but Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are huge obstacles who have earned the targets that they get. So that was always going to be a problem, a pretty huge problem. I don't think at any point this season JSN is going to be just a rock solid 8-10 targets a week. I'm always playing him kind of receiver. That would surprise me, at least while the other guys are healthy.
Yeah, for him to be even remotely in consideration, he has to have something better than a 2.4 average depth of target. Like that's the thing that's weird with him, and the thing that I don't expect to hold up. Like he's not going to do that all year long. Okay, so I'm with Andy that he'll have his moments this year, but he was never going to be. It's really hard to beat out Tyler Lockett. You're not going to beat out DK Metcalf. Like, and he's a rookie receiver, so he'll probably have some moments at the end of the year. If there's ever an injury, he's the reason that you can't. He's a great example of why you can't drop somebody like this. Because let me tell you what, you drop JSN and like Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf get hurt. Yeah, everybody's going to be beating you up to try to take him off the waiver wire. So just keep him on your bench and see what happens. Yep. Last one here before we get to the actual waiver wire. Andy, unfortunately, just got to get this in real quick. At the FF Chef _ sent in, I am here once again asking for you to tell me what is going on with Justin Fields. Sent in the Bernie Sanders gif. I don't know if we need to do a state of the Bears they took the Bears off television while, Taylor Swift, one of the most famous human beings on planet Earth, is in the crowd. They're talking like Patrick Mahomes, Derek Jeter's, relationship. It's about as bad and dark as it could possibly be in Chicago. But I did just get a small laugh at this one from @Erickson41. The Broncos lost by 50 points and are still a 2.5-point favorite going into Chicago. My hair's on fire, panic mode.
Yeah. Again, the reason that we have a Bears zone is to remind you people that we're way past panic with the Chicago Bears. There's no reason to question this anymore. Okay, maybe you can roll out Justin Fields against Denver, and maybe there are going to be some soft spots where you can roll out Justin Fields. But this current version of the Bears offense,
how could you do that? How could you do that?
Yeah, like we're playing a whole bunch of guys over Justin, right? Like you'd be crazy to play him over, like, I don't know, Brock Purdy right now, like a whole bunch of guys from the depths of the QB ranks coming into the season. Like, I don't know, I'd have to think about CJ Stroud versus Justin Fields. Like I understand what it can look like if they actually run Justin Fields, 8, 10, 12 times a game, but we're not getting that. It's also become perfectly clear that you can run on Denver. So like there's, if the Bears are going to be competitive this coming week, it's going to be Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson and hopefully Justin Fields rushing a little bit. But I've all but given up on this passing offense being functional. I don't know why you haven't given up on it already. Like I'd be pleasantly surprised if they have their moments later in the year, if they do the thing again where they flip the switch and suddenly the offense looks different. It'll be disappointing that we had to go through that process again, but I don't know. Maybe that's out there somewhere. But for now, I don't know how you can play these guys. How
familiar are you with the quarterback collective?
Minimally, but I have become very familiar with it over the last couple of weeks.
So for the uninitiated, the QB collective, they have a Twitter account. You should go check it out. See what they've been retweeting.
It's great.
Ever since
it's
this, it's painful. Ever since this Denver Broncos thing, right? Because the QB collective is run by Mike Shanahan, I'm pretty sure. And like, if you look at their website, all the coaches they claim are all like Mike and his, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, and like maybe they claim Brandon Staley too, because he's off the coaching tree because they retweeted a lot of Chargers propaganda yesterday as well. But most of what they were retweeting yesterday, we're taping this Monday, so most of what they're retweeting on Sunday is like anti-Sean Payton stuff, like articles about where he predicted that Tua needs to be benched and like Mike McDaniel's a joke. And, a lot of people now are theorizing, like, did Mike McDaniel put a 70-pointer on Sean Payton yesterday, Sunday, because like this is like a sneaky revenge game, right? And does it also come back to the fact that he blasted, Nate Hackett for one of the worst coaching jobs in NFL history? So I say all this just to get you away from talking about the Bears and to make fun of Sean Payton here for a second. There's a lot, like if you actually look at the schedule, does the QB collective, do they claim Luke Getsy, in week 4? Like, are they going to want to put the beat down on Sean Payton? Obviously Nate Hackett, who they clearly claim week 5, New York Jets, are they going to they can't beat the crap out of the Broncos, but theoretically,
it's a big ask.
It's a big ask. Green Bay, week 7. Obviously Matt LaFleur is in on this. Do they put like the Chargers? If Brandon Staley's part of the club, if he's part of the collective, Mike Shanahan's QB collective, do they put the beat down on him in week 14 and week 17? Minnesota Vikings, obviously Kevin O'Connell he's on the website. I've looked at the website. He's clearly a part of this. Does the entire league like have a vendetta now against Sean Payton because so much of the league is this Shanahan coaching tree disseminated? Sean Payton, maybe on the radar of the entire NFL.
Man, we're seeing this both at the college level and the NFL level right now. It's so nice to have super petty head coaches and head coaching jealousies. Like it adds a layer to the game that I don't know, if you can't appreciate it. Wow, that you're really missing out. Because man, Colorado, Oregon was special on Saturday.
That was something.
Whatever that was between the Dolphins and Broncos was really special on Sunday.
Yeah, more coaches should be pissing each other off so that we get more 70 burgers. This is good for all of us. It's certainly good for fantasy, right? If we get more 70 burgers. All right, Andy, let's get into the top 5 waiver ads of the week. Obviously, there's all this panic out there. People need solutions. Where should they start?
Yeah, well, there's no mystery about it, right? You got to start with Devon Achane. Like 233 total yards, 4 touchdowns. That generally makes you a pretty interesting waiver ad. Like normally I might like to count this down from 5, but there's really no point because there's no suspense at the top. He is, without question, the top waiver ad. He's like, I mean, that sort of performance is just an empty the wallet situation too, because we know the Dolphins are a high-powered offense. We know they want to run the ball. We spoke about it earlier. I do have some concerns about exactly how much workload Achane can actually maintain over the long course of a season. He's not your traditional workhorse running back, right? He's 5'8.5". He's about 185, 190 pounds. That is very small for the position. He also played huge against Denver, right? Broke a bunch of tackles. Really fun game. Goes without saying, he's not going to have, it's probably the greatest game that he's ever going to have in his career. That would be true of anyone, right? Like, I mean, it just doesn't come up very often. So like, I'm sorry if you had it on the bench, but at least you have him. He should absolutely be far and away. Should be the top waiver ad this week. Tank Dell still eligible for this list, which I find a little bit disappointing because I would have thought that coming off, week two, he gets targeted 10 times. He's great. He catches 7 balls, had a just beautiful yards after catch touchdown in that game. I thought it was the coming out party and we're all going to be on Tank Dell. Like I was super aggressive with Tank Dell. I have him all over the place now. And he's still hanging out there at about 30% rostered, eligible for this thing. And then week 3, as they beat down the Jags, 5 catches, 145, a touchdown, a long, nobody else in the camera frame touchdown. This guy's really good. He has broken out. He and Nico Collins are going to be problems. Robert Woods is not yet dust, apparently, right? Like that is a fun offense. CJ Stroud playing so well. CJ Stroud averaging 40 pass attempts per week and over 300 yards through 3 games. Like that's just been a good offense. And Tank Dell has been, I won't say a total surprise because he was a great college player and a super productive college player. And he had kind of a buzzy preseason too, but like, it's all happening for him. We should take action this week. Like hopefully by 1 week from today, he's no longer eligible for this segment. And I don't talk about Tank Dell anymore. Number 3 on my list was Marvin Mims, with the huge caveat of he's barely playing. Like he only played 15 snaps in week 3. He played like 16 snaps the week before when he went over 100 receiving yards, right? And he went over 70 total yards in week 3. It's the Miami game, the blowout, all that. I don't know when like full snaps are going to come. And it's a learning curve in the NFL. I'm not like banging the table and blaming coaches or anything like that. Like it's hard to earn your playing time in the NFL. I get it. As it comes, he's like, there's just not a lot of competition there. Like Cortland Sutton had a disappointing game. Jerry Jeudy is still like a guy that we do a lot of wish casting about, but we haven't really seen a signature season from him. So not a ton of competition. Marvin Mims, a really talented player who I think we should at least stash on rosters, if not start. Rashee Rice, this guy had a chance at like an eruption game for Kansas City. He was tackled at the 1 yard line like twice. As it was, he still saw 7 targets. I think he caught 5 balls. Like it was a good game, but it could have been a good game with 2 touchdowns. Barely missed them. So like that explosion, I think might be, it probably is coming because he's tied to Patrick Mahomes, and eventually it's gonna come around for all these receivers. He was pretty interesting. Just saw a big uptick in playing time. He played 39 snaps against the Bears. He was over 50% in terms of snap share for the first time this season. So that seems notable to me, and he should be stashed. And then the other guy, like number 5 on this list, I'm not, he's not necessarily the highest ceiling player, but Josh Palmer is tied to a really good offense. He's tied to Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert just lit up the Vikings, and the Mike Williams injury is clearly the short-term beneficiary here is going to be Palmer. Palmer, once again, on every drop back from the moment Mike Williams got injured, Josh Palmer was running a route. Like he's going to be on the field all the time. He's the veteran. He's the guy they trust. He's going to be on the field constantly. You can expect a bunch of like 6 catch, 65 yard, maybe a touchdown games from Josh Palmer moving forward.
I think Tank Dell and Josh Palmer are like in a different tier to me than these Mims. I agree. Like it's got to happen at some point. Rashee Rice, I kind of think maybe the playing time might have been a little skewed by the fact that friggin' Blaine Gabbert was in the game at one point. You know, like
it's fair. It's fair.
But still, I agree that he's talented. You know, and could be a big piece down the stretch. But just if you had to prioritize like Tank Dell or Josh Palmer, just because Palmer's going to be out there so much, and like we have seen him produce. If he doesn't have to be the number one receiver for this team, and like as long as Keenan Allen is out there, he's still going to be the top perimeter guy. So that is kind of like I'm splitting hairs here. But if you had to prioritize between Tank Dell and Josh Palmer, is it Dell over Palmer?
Well, this is kind of a difficult distinction because I think Josh Palmer is right now the clear number 2 in a very good offense. I think Tank Dell might be the number 1 on an I don't know what they are kind of offense, but they're really fun. But I mean, this is, Tank Dell was targeted 10 times a couple of weeks ago. That led the team. He sees 7 targets this week. I'm like, he might be the 1 or the 1A right now. I don't think that's out there for Josh Palmer. So yeah. I guess just in terms of like a swing for the fences, what if everything goes right pick? For me, it's Dell.
It makes sense. I still think Nico probably finishes the year as the best receiver on the team, but these guys are going to be close. They're both really good players. And CJ Stroud, I mean, just can't say enough about how well he's playing at this point. They get the Steelers in week 4, great defense overall, but they have been shredded by perimeter receivers so far this year. So this could be a big Nico Collins and Tank Dell week. So I like those guys being ahead there. All right, Andy, we did it. Another full week of panic in the books where I'm not sure we helped anybody feel any better at all.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really talk anybody down from the ledge this week. I mean, I tried with Josh Jacobs. I just don't have a lot of recent evidence with Josh Jacobs that I can point to other than last year's rushing crown. But I don't have anything from 2023 that I can really hang my hat on and say, see, Josh Jacobs still got it. It's just my own stubborn belief in the player.
Well, like we often talk about here on the show, once you get to like week 4, that's when things start to normalize and like you really have a sense of where the season's going by like week 4 and 5. So next week, I really expect you people to bring the heat with some panic, because this is when I'm going to start to allow like, all right, we should be legitimately concerned if we have seen nothing good yet from players. So again, week 4, pump the mailbag full of submissions, fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. For now, this episode is over. On Wednesday, Eckler's Edge is back. We have plenty to talk about with Austin, a ton to get into, so definitely make sure you tune into that. Until then, we're out.